Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jet Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Welcome to Side Quests, your high-octane distraction from those other podcasts. We're a pen and paper RPG audio show featuring chatter about rules and how to master them, epic world building, player investment, and interviews with the people who make the games you love. Listen in as we trade tabletop war stories and make judgment calls on odd situations, and do everything we can to give you more RPG resources than you could dream of, all from a simple side quest. What's up, guys? I'm Paladin of Podcast Rob, and we got our other paladins here today.
Hi, I'm Paladin Eli.
And I'm still Craig.
And we did a little bit of catching up before the show. We're all doing well, and we're not on a time constraint, but we did want to jump right in to what we call the social contract, because I just started a session and I've actually used one for the first time, and both of you guys have experience with the unwritten rules and the written rules of this, I guess, formulaic layout of expectations, right?
We're talking about basically social etiquette at the gaming table. But Rob, for context, what is going on with you? What have you done in this case to get us all on the same page here? You wrote a specific list of things out. What's the deal?
So what I had initially done is actually just hit up Google, which I know sounds kind of lazy, but I wasn't sure what to include. I simply Googled the social contract for tabletop games, and I got an entire list of things to talk about that included the etiquette at the table, things that have to do with eating or scheduling, the rules, the system that we're going to play, the expectations from the characters, the players, the DM, and all of the accoutrements that go with that in both the running and playing of the game for the duration of the campaign.
Why? What motivated you to look this up in the first place?
So I've been playing with just about the same group of people for, I'm going to say, nearly 15 years. I've got 12 to 16 different players that rotate in and out, so it's never the same party. Well, it's not always the same party, but it's always comprised of the same pool of people. Sometimes we add, some people drop, etc. But 12 to 16 is about the average pool that I draw from. And in the past, one of my players has been, I'm going to say, a real cringe lord. He's been reformed at this point, but still kind of nervous. I've had issues with scheduling, food, people cleaning up after themselves. I mean, I host the game, so I don't mind if they eat.
We're talking about a game in person at your house.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's important to remember because right now I'm running almost exclusively digital games. Eli, you're the same way?
50-50. I've got one game that's in person and one that's online.
That's actually a really convenient spread between the three of us. Okay, so Rob, your game all in person.
Yes.
Okay. And how many people do you generally have at a game at once?
I run generally 7 to 9 players.
Dude, your group is huge.
Wow.
I had no idea. That's enormous.
I got a table that seats 10. Why not, right?
All right. So it's important to know these things. You know, the social conventions that work for, one GM and 3 players are very different for 9 gamers at the table. So sorry, please continue. So that's your situation.
I have another question. How did you present these social contracts? Did it differ how you presented it to like your long-term players versus any new players?
So I had 2 players that were unable to show up, so they had to phone in. And I specifically asked them to phone in because I wanted to present this entirety of the social contract. And what I did was I simply said, guys, we're going to go over this. We're going to talk about the expectations of the game. We're going to talk about the rules of the house, the situation that we're in coming over to game. And I just went through this list bullet point by bullet point. And I think it took me about 35 minutes to go over all of it. And then afterwards, I ended up writing it out.
So how did it land? I mean, what were your players' reactions? Did they know what they were in for when they showed up? Were they like, yeah, cool? Or were they like, wait a minute, that's not what I want? What's up?
I kind of gave them the heads up that we're going to go over the character creation process, which was one thing. And I ended up laying the social contract on them sporadically, I guess I can say. They did not know that it was coming.
So you like interdispersed it between like throughout the session?
No.
Well,
no.
Sorry, I think I'm unclear.
So sorry.
Said, hey, we're going to start the session. Surprise, what we're going to talk about first is what we all agreed to do and how we'll act at the table?
Yeah, after we did characters.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm definitely interested to know how that went. How did they take it?
They were surprised at first. I've got oddly enough, this is actually really funny. My players are 1, 2, 3. Altogether, right now in my party, there are 4 couples, 8 people total. So it's me, my wife, and 3 other couples. So one of them just had a child, and it's okay if they bring their baby. I don't mind. I'm not going to say you can't play because you have a baby. We have our 2 kids, and they're between the ages of 6 and 3. And they're allowed to interrupt the game, and that's acceptable. It's understandable. We get it. Our friend brings his 5-year-old, 4 or 5-year-old, so they can be friends, gather, etc. Not a big deal. I was afraid that she was feeling rather singled out, but she was also the only one making the most amount of eye contact. So you gravitate to people who make the eye contact. She took it very well.
The 5-year-old or the new mother?
The new mother.
Okay,
No, that's great. The
5-year-old felt very singled out.
Right. No, the new mom, she didn't feel super singled out. She just made a lot of eye contact, and I had to reassure her that anything that needed to happen with the baby is absolutely acceptable. And it's because of this that one of my previous cringy players, I specifically mentioned a no harassment, whether it be in character, well, not necessarily in character, because you can have in character harassment as long as it doesn't translate to player harassment.
I guess if everyone's on board with it, yeah, okay.
Right. And one of the other issues was bouts of sexual harassment, because certain gentlemen don't understand how to interact with female gamers at a table a lot of time. And It's super unfortunate. I specifically had to make mention of that. And these things had accumulated over a period of time where I was just tired of the same issues. And to set the precedent this time, it was to call it out. Scheduling's been a big issue. Like, I need people to let me know when they cancel before the day of, before a few hours before. If you're working, you generally know that you're going to be working more than 15 minutes before game starts. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
And
I mean, unless you've got players on a hostage rescue team or something, but
right. But even then, I expect them to drop in at some point.
Just phone in between. Yeah.
Right. Well, my big thing is D&D, tabletop games. It's a twofold, maybe threefold thing for me. At the end of the week, every 2 weeks we play. It's my time to relax, hang out. Even though I'm just doing the DM work, it's still a lot of work, but it's relaxing and I enjoy it. So it's a time with friends that I enjoy. I consider it relaxing, and it's a time that we can really hang out. But I've had an issue before in the past where I no longer realize or know if I'm playing D&D or if I'm just hosting a tabletop themed get together and party, and that gets obnoxious.
I've had similar issues with groups where sometimes the line between we are getting together to just socialize and occasionally play this game has blurred between that and we are here to play a game and in the process socialize. And I think that can get blurry if it's not explicitly described what the goal is for the day. And sometimes it's one or the other, but a tendency toward one or the other is probably worth calling out.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that's the risk of having such a large table of players at the same time.
I was going to say,
I typically try to keep smaller groups.
Is it your preference to have such a large group, Rob?
It is.
Like, what's your ideal number of players?
I actually like 5 to 6 the most. And the reason I like pushing to 7 to 9 is because not everybody can make it every time. So having that buffer of individuals allows me to still be able to play and run when 2 or 3 people can't make it, because I will run with a minimum of 3.
Eli, what's your ideal party size if you are running the game? I guess player size. Party size is a separate value.
I like, for narrative games, I like 3 to 4 players. And,
do you have a specific system in mind when you say narrative games?
Or
do you mean anything where role playing is at the forefront?
Anything where there's a little bit more focus on the forefront, or any game where the player has a lot, like in D&D or in Hackmaster, when you swing your sword, you hit, you do X amount of damage. That's very like 1-to-1 ratio. But any game where there's like you succeed with advantage, or like the Star Wars Destiny game where you triumph. It's less about just succeeding and more all the additional effects or like statuses. Any game where there's a lot of narrative and like player interaction with the environment, and that's really the forefront. I like to have less players, just because I feel like that because everyone has narrative control, it's easier to maintain a story together with a small group of people on the same page.
That makes sense. For my part, when the majority of the games that I run are high surface area games, like sort of the latter thing that you were describing, where there's a lot of things to mess with. There's certainly procedural combat elements, but I love a scene where I can describe some strange artifact that the players can then try to interact with, and it's them messing with it. There's no clear like, oh, I'm gonna roll an investigation check or an arcana check, and that's the end of it. It's like, you succeed, move on. It's like, I feed the brass rod into the glowing aperture, but halfway. What is, like that kind of stuff. So as a result, I'd like a relatively small number of players. I think my ideal is 4. 5 is good, but once we get over 5, it gets. I feel like I have to still divide the amount of spotlight that every player gets evenly, and in an even distribution, no one gets enough. So more than 5 gets kind of itchy for me.
That's fair. And like I said, I like a larger group because not everybody can make it every time. So I don't always expect everybody to show up. When they do, it can get a little chaotic and hectic. And in order to keep things flowing really well, I generally try to keep pacing pretty quick. And I told everybody that this time I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to go for long form storytelling and more descriptive cinematic feel. And I'm a huge end of the world, big plot hook, large story arc kind of guy. And this time I told them I'm keeping them all super close, super local. They have got to be likable characters. Everybody has to like them. Not all the NPCs, but all the people at the table have to like them. And these are things that I laid out. We're playing Pathfinder First Edition, so I put them all on the slow XP progression track, which means that they're going to be at levels for a lot longer than they have normally been used to. I'm a big fan of power leveling my characters, my players, etc. So this is a completely new route for me, starting with session 0, which is normally not done, starting with the questionnaires I did, which is like a session -0, or a -1, excuse me, and going all the way into the social contract, which I ended up writing out, and they have access to look at whenever they want on our shared Google Drive.
Do you think that this social contract will help keep your games more on track, or your players more focused, or just really just improve like the table side behavior, and then it'll improve your game?
I think for the most part, it will immediately affect the tableside behavior, and that will affect the game itself, primarily because as we are looking to correct poor etiquette and poor behavior, it's only meant to make better players through them being more aware or attentive in game. And the idea of keeping things slow and more narrative is to help get my players more engaged in their characters and develop a better relationship with the world of Animar around them.
It sounds like you're trying to both lean further into their interpersonal interactions, but also establish some guardrails to keep those interactions safe and pleasant and enjoyable, really, for everyone involved. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, as you describe it, I mean, I guess that seems totally fair. It really sounds like bumper bowling. And
yeah,
I mean, yeah, why not at this rate? I want to try a different game style, and I want to make sure my table behaves in a way that is fair and indiscriminately non-discriminate towards anybody. I'm going to do blanket safety, which is funny because I'm not usually a safe space kind of person.
Well, what does that mean to you when you say, what does a safe space mean to you in terms of a gaming place?
As much as I want to say everybody fends for themselves, I don't go that far. I don't consider any content off topic, off table, or too risque. Absolutely nothing bothers me. I am a roll with it as a player, as a DM. I kind of gauge what feels good for my players, so I don't include certain torturous elements that may be triggering in today's words. But in general, I don't consider myself continuously aware of my players' triggers. I don't generally.
You're still doing your best to read the room, but you're not
right.
Like pre-building in this idea that you will never be upset.
Right, and I don't generally have what people consider like an X card or safe card or red card. There's usually no stop, retcon, continue with my games.
For listeners unfamiliar with the X card, just briefly, I unfortunately don't remember the exact name of the guy or person actually who put it together, but it's essentially a tool for gaming tables where if there's some element or content that shows up in the game that someone is just not cool with being present, it's as simple as a 3x5 index card with a big X on it that they can just slide into the table so that it's seen, and with perhaps a few questions of like, wait, what, like which element is not going to fly here, it is immediately moved on from, without the responsibility of explaining why.
Right.
That's the short version.
It is, and yeah.
If I may ask, you say that you like run a game where anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
How often, like there's general categories of things that might cause an X card to be played. How often do you build or prepare those things into your games, or are you just saying that if the player went out of their way to find something,
all right, yeah,
that they'd find it? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, I'll just simply say that big triggers generally include things like drug abuse, child abuse, torture, rape, animal abuse, things along the nature that are very graphic in depictions. I don't usually build any of those items into my games. Sometimes there's a story element that I will glaze over. I will use the sort of like the power of the mind to fade to black in a scene that they can fill in the blanks however they decide is necessary without going into detail. If a player explicitly goes out looking for these things, I don't generally say no. It's a little weird, and if it makes people super uncomfortable.
Has that happened?
Yeah, I've had players that have gone out explicitly looking for things. Which, I mean, to be fair, when I was really young and just getting started, I also just sort of went out of my way to look for horrible things. But I was playing with a bunch of immature guys anyway, so it didn't bother us. But that mentality was still there. Like, these are real life elements that happen, and just because you're heroes doesn't mean that you are shielded from them. But you now have a moral obligation to essentially find ways to stop some of these things or avenge those who cannot avenge themselves. So those are the routes that my mentality takes when I look at this. Players who just go out looking for it, there's a whole lot of fade to black, and I will actually say something along the lines of, we'll pin it for the table, and you and I will talk about it later outside.
So this is generally understood. And I'm curious, did the players just sort of look at you, acknowledge, nod, and move on, or was there any back and forth over what the nature of this agreement really was? What was allowed, what was not, what was acceptable, what wasn't? How much of a dialogue was it versus you sort of proclaiming from the GM seat?
There was plenty of proclaiming. I think. I think some of the topics,
as is your right.
This whole thing has to be kind of explainy though. It's syllabus day.
Absolutely. And so I actually found the original list that I used, which is from rpgmuseum.fandom.com, and it's just the social contract. So as I went through the entire list, I mean, we've already established that we were going to be playing Pathfinder. We were going to be using a modified version of certain rules to make the story flow faster, so we didn't get bogged down by some of the details. Explained the house rules that we're going to utilize. I explained to them the genre, the tone of the game, and all of these things. They were like, okay, we're on board. That's what we're signing up for. Other than that, when it came to things like scheduling, when I brought that up, people explained how they have run into scheduling issues before, what they would like to do, kind of set the tone and expectation for if there's a scheduling issue that arises. So that dialogue is like, good. I like knowing that you will do the best that you can to let me know things might happen. And then as it gets closer, I'm at least aware that you might have to cancel last minute. Like, I've got a preemptive moment from you. So that was decent. When I mentioned the safety tools like the X card, the red card, one person, our very newest player, she got really confused and she asked plenty of questions, and her confusion came from the indifference being able to separate character from player. So like, her character's fine with certain things as long as it happens in game, but personally she can't handle it. So she got to talk about that. We were okay. This was the first time I've ever asked if players had specific needs that I needed to accommodate for, and they had to ask for clarification. I'm like, look, if you guys have seizures, we need to know if I got to look out for something. Like, don't hide stuff because it's
Did anyone have anything?
One of our members is diabetic, and if his blood sugar gets really low, he may just pass out. So I asked for anything that I can look out for. It's just like, yo, buddy, I need you to kind of have a candy bar. You look like you're going to pass out on us. I don't want anybody fainting, regardless of how good of friends we are. Table chatter was another big one. That one got a lot of people talking because I am the kind of DM that when table chatter starts to get out of control, I don't bring people back. I'm like, all right, you guys obviously don't want to play. I'm just going to sit here and do my own thing and wait for you guys to shut up. And everybody has a problem with table chatter, but they all partake in table chatter to a strong degree, except for one other player. So they all got to voice how irritated they were with it. And between that irritation, we collectively agreed to curb it as much as we possibly can. And I gave them my commitment to try to bring them back as much. Yeah, Craig.
Well, I think that talking about this stuff, it's not just... Certainly there's value in everybody agreeing. It's like, oh yeah, we don't like table chatter. But I think the opportunity to discuss these individual issues, and you're like, hey, this is going to be the procedure at this particular gaming table when I'm running. The opportunity to discuss it also on a sort of meta level allows people to signal, hey, I'm also not okay with this. Because if you're just like, okay, we'll do that, it could be, sure, under duress, or sure, I disagree, but I'll go along with it. But having that space to discuss it and sort of illustrate, yeah, it's not just that I'm agreeing, it's that I actively, don't want this bad thing to happen, can help establish a share, like a consensual attitude among the group of like, not only are we all agreeing not to do this, it's because we all have a mutual understanding that we share this attitude. Mm-hmm. And that can help establish like social glue, especially among a new group, giving people time to talk about this stuff freely to establish context.
Yeah.
What is your table doing anything specific? Like, are you like trying to curb side talk at a certain amount of time, or Are you adapting anything to stop side talk?
Yeah, actually, Eli, one of your ideas that you had presented me with initially when you and I were talking prior to SideQuest really kicking off in its current iteration was taking about a half hour prior to game start to just kind of unload a little bit of conversation, play a soft game, kind of warm up to the actual gaming session. And that will be something that we institute. So we start at 5 p.m., and that's when everybody is supposed to be here. And I told them at 5 p.m., they show up at 5 p.m., and we'll take about 30 minutes to kind of unwind, catch up, offload, soft game. One of our players suggested started 30 minutes earlier, but 5 o'clock works better for the majority of the group. So we kept it at 5 o'clock, and we'll start rolling dice at 5:30 at this point, which is still a decent amount of time. We run 5 to 10. That's really the big thing right now. And the idea I really wanted was to just kind of eliminate as much as possible. But I offered the solution that I will also help try to bring it back in. So I will go against my normalities and try to refocus them. Usually
it's a good indicator on your part too. It's like, hey, I want to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, expressing that volition, saying like, I want to keep playing. Let's get back to it.
Right. So those were the really big things that we kind of talked about. And the one thing that I made sure to mention is that as the DM, I'm going to say more control over the table here at this point, because it tracks better. And I told them that I am not going to call anybody out at the table in front of everybody. Like, I will always do that privately. I'm not going to embarrass anybody. I will always make mention of it, and we will work on a solution for them. And
for what kind of stuff? For like interpersonal problems or what?
Or just like side chatter?
Just about anything. If, for instance, if one of my players is the root of a majority of side chalk, instead of calling them out like, dude, you're the reason everybody's always distracted, you got to shut the hell up. I'm not going to do that at the table. I'm off script, off the side of the table. It's like, hey, you're really kind of the driving force of some of the distractions here. I really need your help to tone that down so we can bring everybody back around and focus more on the gaming, because out of our 5-hour block, man, you're kind of the reason we're only hitting 3 hours of rolling dice.
Not an unreasonable thing to say to somebody if they're really serially derailing the game. So I hear you.
So again, I mean, playing in person, those were the things that really had applied to us. Now, both of you guys, I would assume, similar on some aspects, but in general, much more free online. Like, side chatter seems to be something that you can't do very well online.
I definitely, yeah. I definitely don't have as much of a problem with people like one player turning to another player and starting a separate threaded conversation, because we're all essentially, you know, you're in a Zoom call, you're in a Discord room. You can't really do that. Mm-hmm. I have found over the years that taking 10, 15 minutes, occasionally a little bit longer at the beginning, to sort of like, hey, how's your day going? What's going on? Who's laughing about what? You know, do you see any good movies lately? Just sort of, you know, shooting the shit a little bit. Gets a lot of that stuff out of the way early on. And yeah, people need to warm up a little bit. You know, they're done with work, they've sat down, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm with friends now, I can loosen up, everything's cool. A couple of laughs in, and suddenly everybody's ready to jump right in. So it's absolutely useful to have that front-loaded option to just, you know, say hi and catch up a little bit. Eli, what about you?
Yeah, I have a definitely a tiered format approach to it too, where like the first step is everyone sits or is like joins the call for online, and there's usually like 15, 20 minutes of chatter. And then at the next stage, we don't use any dice, but we just do some in-character role playing where several characters interact in a harmless moment, essentially. And then we start. And I've definitely noticed, like, going from chatter to just role playing to being into the game, there's a huge shift in focus and in people maintaining their character throughout the entire session.
That's a really cool idea. So, like you say, hey, at some point over the, while you were resting, what does, Bob, what do you say to Alice? Or what does your character say to Alice as you're like cooking or like something like that?
Yeah, so we have a table of, say, 4 or 5 people. I'll roll some arbitrary dice depending on how we're feeling, usually like a d4, and I'll be like, oh, this is the number of characters that are going to start in the scene. Anyone else can join the scene, but those are the players that start. The scene can be anything. It could definitely be just like while you're walking, but oftentimes we've found like there's moments that will happen in combat or in the heat of a discussion. Like there's a moment that'll happen where someone's like will say a line, and the other character's like, "Oh, I wonder why that is," or they just mentioned they were a slave at some point, and then like at the beginning of a session, someone will be like, "Yeah, my character is really interested in asking this character a question," or like there was a while where they were hunting this legendary boar, and one of the characters played kind of a god of nature that was fine with hunting, but not with setting a trap. And they wanted because the party was trying to stop this giant rampaging beast, and so this character just didn't want traps to be involved, and so that took the form of this discussion. A big thing about it is when you start, the first thing that you say is a description of your character doing something. So because a lot of the times we have really cool like characters will shift to like maybe you have a wizard that's slowly turning into a lizard, and because you don't always have character art or you don't always describe what something that's happening, you'd be like, wait, I didn't know you were starting to have a tail. So you can kind of like update like how your and for especially characters that might have like, we play a game with quirks and flaws, and some of them are like hairy, which doesn't always come up. But when you're describing your character, and you can kind of bring those to the forefront.
That is really, really cool. That seems like a great way to get people to like focus on imagine the characters, the sort of mundane moments, the armor cleaning and the blade sharpening between the dramatic moment. That's really neat. I'm stealing that. That's fantastic.
I told Eli the same thing when he told me about it, and just so we can give another quick recap, because I think this idea is fantastic. I love the idea. I want more people to do it, Eli. So I've kind of dubbed this in my notes as campfire moments. And
nice. That's a good name for it. Yeah, campfire moments.
And it's just strict RP, about 5-10 minutes for in-character to character role playing, where they start with the description of their character physically and what they're doing at the time of this campfire moment. And I got that, like the general gist, right?
Yeah. And a big thing is it's just our role playing. So no dice, don't roll anything. Just chat.
I like that.
I had a much smaller mechanism for sort of focusing in from last time, or last session rather, that I've been using to pretty good effect. Essentially, at the end of sessions, I would say, okay, each one of you, what is the single most outstanding question your character is trying to find the answer to right now? And everyone would get a turn to say what they're wondering about. And it would help me focus too. So they may be like, oh, what's in the next door based on those sounds? Or like, why did that NPC not follow us here when they said they wanted what was here? And it gives me an idea of what they're focusing on, but it also gives, a clear point for them to pick up on, because at the beginning of the next session, I'll say, hey, so last time we played, your character's burning questions were, and I'll go down the list, and it's an immediate prompt for them to pick up where they left off. I will tend to ask one of my players to take notes during the session, and I rotate through each one. And I always try to make sure that that player writes down what those burning questions were, so that we always have a record of it. And then at the beginning of the next one, those get recorded again into the start of the next session.
I like that.
Burning questions and campfire moments. I see a theme.
It's
that seems really useful.
It actually really worked. I was surprised. Like, I came up with it on the spur of the moment. I'm sure someone else has had the idea, but it sort of occurred to me. It's great. It's one of the most sort of immediately good feedback ideas I've ever tried to implement. So like, give it a shot if it would make sense for your game. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think I might yoink that.
Yeah, I like it, and I'm going to give you guys a quick visual reference for something I've kind of done here. So it's going to be weird for viewers. Right here on my screen, I got a whiteboard. And
you've got a whiteboard in your gaming room. Okay.
yes, and that whiteboard is designed where the big thing that will always be at the bottom is XP to next level. But it's designed to be used for what kind of like quest they're on right now and what their next goals are. So future goals, current goals. So they have a constant reminder of what they're striving to get towards. It's similar to the burning questions, but I like the burning questions. And what I do when it comes to notes is I bribe my players. I give them XP based on how many notes they take and how well they take notes. And I tell them it's not mandatory or necessary, but I love it when they take notes in character. So that way their notes are very particular to their character, which means they make sense for them. And when you kind of collectively go over everybody's notes, you get a party consensus of an idea.
I have a player.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I have a player who happens to be an awesome artist, and he likes to draw a lot about stuff about the game, which means we have loads of awesome art about our game. But he also does like notes for his character, because his character can also draw, and so you'll have like these really awesomely written out sheets where there's like scribings of things that's happened with scrawling on it. It's really incredibly well done.
The reason why I asked, what I was going to say is the reason why I asked my players to start taking notes is prior to that, I would take notes during the session. It was a bit of a distraction, but it was important because, I needed my own records. But what I found was that people basically weren't reading my recaps, which you can't ever demand an audience for your work, but it was kind of frustrating because they weren't really always up to date on what was actually happening. Plus, I kind of gave away stuff based on what I thought was important enough to take notes on.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up asking a player to do it one day. I think that's how it went. And they ended up taking notes, but then they wrote an in-character sort of journal entry. They're a designer, they're a game designer like me, and they're also a writer. Their writing is delightful, and it was super fun reading this character's in-character journal, secret journal about what was going on. And what's ended up happening since then is that when it's someone else's turn, sometimes they'll just take a couple of bullet points and that'll be enough, but sometimes they have started trying to write in-character recaps. They're not always encyclopedic, but they are always at least telling of like, well, okay, that was a major thing that happened. And then if it's really vague and if it's something that only their character would care about, at the bottom, there's usually a short like, also X, Y, and Z happens, just so that we don't leave out anything super important. But it's evolved into this really nice bit where the players decided to start writing microfiction on their own, and I'm not complaining about it. It's great. It's really fulfilling every time one of my players decides that they want to think about their character at that level of depth.
That's cool.
Yeah. Way back when, I used to try to write, transcribe the entire sessions that we'd play through into story form. I think I still have a Google Drive with 80 some pages of a campaign where after every session I'd just get on and I'd kind of narrative up what happened.
That's crazy. So I'm going to hang a microphone over our table and I'll record every session just so we have a record of it, not with the intent to publish, but just so we have a record and notes we can go back to. As a DM,
you are going to, or you have been doing this?
I will be mounting a microphone. I've been looking for the right mount. I might just make something. But as a DM, I generally don't take notes. I leave it to my players because they tell me what's important and I build a story off of that. As a player, I take notes as my character in general. And for example, I once had a bard that omitted the rest of the party in all of his stories. So his notes never included other members of the party. He was always the hero of the story. He was always the one who did everything. And after a few months of that, things that happened in the first part of the games, they didn't remember like who did what, and the only recollection was me doing it. So, true to a bard's story, you tell it long enough, it becomes true.
That's awesome.
It was just it was fun. Everybody hated the character, but they loved the process. Hate the process, love the character. I don't know how to say that right now, but they did not appreciate it by the end of the game. So, but yeah, that's kind of it. Now, Eli, with your social contract, you have both in-person games and your online games. Do you find anything necessarily has to cross over, or do you pick and choose what's necessary based on how you feel your party is comprised?
Do you mean of like rules to apply for the social contract?
Yes, essentially. Like, what kind of things would you talk about? Anything that really does cross over?
One thing that I love about playing in person is, I mean, you start at 5, players are hungry. I like to eat. I'm hungry as well.
Mm-hmm.
I like to do meals with the like in that first time we'll just eat a meal together instead of like everyone else. Like either we'll do a potluck or we'll rotate through everyone being in charge of one meal and bringing it, and then we all eat together.
You guys are really making me miss running games in person. Oh man,
Dude, there's something about it. It's just I can't give it up.
It's been years. It's like even before the pandemic really kicked in. I hadn't run in person for quite a while. I miss the hell out of it. We'll get back to it at some point. It's just like everybody's settled in at this point. It's not even like oh no pandemic stuff anymore. We're pretty chill about it at this point. But
you got to start by just scheduling like one weekend at a time. Be like,
I have an in-person game. I have an in-person game scheduled for Halloween. I'm super stoked about it. We're gonna cook. It's gonna be great. I might bake bread. I think I might make bread.
Ooh.
Anyway, Eli, you were saying.
I did one time prepare, like the party was going to go into like a scene where there was going to be a feast, and so I like prepared the feast in game for the table. So I had
nice, very cool.
I wish
that was pretty fun.
I wish our listeners could see you on camera because you are very proud of this moment. I can read it all over your
It was just so much fun.
I love it.
I love playing in person.
Same.
It gives me a lot of energy.
Deep sigh.
It's one of those things. I once had a chili cook-off, not in game, but it took place during game. So we would be able to eat everybody's chili while we were going through a game, and it was between Thanksgiving and Christmas, so it was our cold months here in the Midwest. One of those things that I expected the game not to be taken very seriously because we were distracted with food, but it was still decent. And Craig, you mentioned an in-person Halloween game, and that got me thinking. I wanted to ask this a day or so ago. How do you guys do like Halloween, Christmas, holiday specials? I'll call them.
I would be honest, I don't have the most spirit for Halloween. Actually, I mean, I love Halloween. I love all that jazz, but I don't go out of my way to do any festive games.
I used to be part of a group where we always tried to do like a Halloween horror one shot. If we need a break, that's fine. But I think it's a hard sell for me to switch over to like a horror one shot or to suddenly change it because usually we've got a plot rolling. There's stuff that's already happening, and to suddenly sidetrack it would end up being more disruptive than the one shot might be necessarily enjoyable. So I also tend not to really do seasonal stuff like that.
Really?
It's hard enough actually getting anybody to show up for a game around Christmas. Usually everybody evaporates for a month and a half around the holidays. So
yep. And that you got something, Eli?
I do. That is one reason why I do. I mean, I'm a sucker for long campaigns, but I also think short arcs or short campaigns are a great thing to do. You can like try out a bunch of different modules or adventures and just kind of jump around and take the same characters through a bunch of different stories, have them die, try something different.
Yeah.
So
I generally write them in. Like I know that going horror in the middle of whatever campaign, if it doesn't fit, it's hard. But trick or treating, the idea of My trap dungeon I told you guys about, which is more trick than treat. I might do something like that. Let's see, last Christmas I was running a game and they met Santa Claus, who Santa Claus and Odin are the same person, which I stole from Jim Butcher's Dresden Files, by the way. It makes complete sense if you think about it too. Odin and Santa Claus being the same. But I have this issue where we play bi-weekly, which is fine, but sometimes you gotta shortchange a holiday special, or you have to set it up too far in advance and it's drawn out. You don't want it to end after the holiday. So yeah, as Craig said, month and a half at least, everybody just sort of disappears from December to the end of January.
Although, if you guys who are listeners, are looking for a good short-term horror game to try to run as a one-shot, may I recommend from personal experience the Mothership RPG. It's science fiction horror. It is extremely fast to get into. It's very rules light. And as long as your players are on board with sci-fi horror, you've got a lot that you can work with. Very good for horror one-shots.
Dig it.
I agree. I really also like I also really enjoy the Mothership RPG.
Good.
Can't wait to actually get my first edition box set out of that. That Kickstarter ended a while ago, so they're chugging away on that. I'll definitely want to talk about that.
The Aliens RPG is also really good for one-shot horror.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do not think it's very good for campaign games, but for one-shots, it's great.
That's because you can kill everybody in one game they expect to die.
Yeah.
So it's not bad. It's not bad. Let's take a quick look at time, because I think we're getting kind of close to the end of what we wanted to hit up at, aren't we? Yeah, we are. All right, so
I think we are.
Quick recap. We kind of covered our. I just went blank, guys.
Covered our bases for talking about social contracts for our game tables.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was like,
no, it's okay. Just a suggestion. It's all right.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, our social contracts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the social contract that I typed up. I'll post it on epictablegames.com, so all of our listeners can check that out. If it doesn't suit you, definitely hit Google. Otherwise, let us know in the Facebook comments or send us a voice message through Spotify, and you can tell us about your social contract, some of the issues that you've had to resolve, etc. And check us out next week, same time.
Good day.